going to start with the fact that you are one of the most influential industry and business leaders in Latin America and also in Mexico.
Yes.
And for anyone who's been following the news the last couple of weeks, Mexico has been in the news quite a lot because President Trump has set his sights on the country and has floated the possibility of imposing tariffs with a little bit of a delay introduced. Let me just ask you, as an industry leader, as an influential business person from the region, how does the threat of tariffs affect your ability to conduct business and to make decisions about your business operations?
Yes. Well, Mexico is in a very difficult position right now because of this threat from the Trump administration to basically throw away the free trade agreement and treat us like a pariah, like a divorced woman. Boom. I don't want to see you again. Close the wall, close the border. If that happens, it's a huge shock for my country, Mexico, because for the past 30 years, our model has been integration into the North American market with Canada, the US, and Mexico. By the way, Trump is divorcing both Mexico and Canada.
Yeah.
So he's throwing away the North American Free Trade Agreement or threatening with that. And if that comes to happen, the effect in Mexico will be huge unemployment because our manufacturing sector for export is huge. And we do 700 billion of trade with the US.
Yeah.
It will be a very, very bad impact.
Yeah.
So we don't know if it's going to happen or not, but the uncertainty is not helping.
No, it doesn't help at all, anywhere. Do you think...
And I want to say, why is this happening? No? So the politics of the decision are very perverse. So Trump is saying, because Mexico is taken over by cartels, and because Mexico is taking fentanyl and putting into our poor young people's bodies, we must do something. And the first thing he does is put a wall and tariffs, and the next thing he does is throw some bombs into the cartel land. It's a very bad situation, and our government has done a lot to deserve this because our government has not been strict in controlling the gangland violence that my country is suffering. But that is a very bad way to start talking about business opportunities in Latin America.
I figured that it is topical. And when you think about it from the perspective of sentiment in Latin America, clearly the threat of tariffs is hanging over there. But maybe let's just talk about what opportunities and growth you have witnessed.
Yes.
And also, let's also just remind everybody that Latin America is a huge continent, and you're talking about so many different countries with different prerogatives. So maybe let's just start there.
So Latin America is a very big place, number one. From Mexico City to Buenos Aires, it takes longer to fly to Buenos Aires than it takes to get to London, just so you get a dimension of the thing. So London is actually closer to Mexico City. Then there's 350 million people in the region, which Mexico has 130 million. It's a very young country. Most of Mexicans are under 26 years old. 50% are under 26 years old. So that's human capital, and it's very valuable because the attitude of people is that if you work hard, you get ahead. They're not waiting around for handouts from the government, though they're getting that more and more every day. Now, the problem is it's such a diverse region that it's not really productive to talk about Latin America, because what happens in Brazil or Argentina or Colombia or Chile is very different from what happens in Mexico. And so the first step for anybody who's interested is to get to know people in the private sector where you can do business. And that's why we're here, and we're very thrilled to see what's going on in the Emirates, especially in Dubai. it's really a wonderful country and a wonderful place to do business.
Not that dissimilar in terms of natural resources, being rich with natural resources, young demographics, youth.
Yes.
So a lot of dynamics are actually in common between this part of the world and Latin America.
Not only that, but also there's a
values.
lot of family business in this region. And in Latin America, also, most companies are family-owned, with the exception of the government sector.
I want to ask you a question specifically about Argentina. And the reason I bring up Argentina is there's been an interesting economic case over the past year or so. The advent of Javier Milei, he was an outsider. He was a very unorthodox economist, and he came in with big plans. He literally, his motto was "No hay plata," there is no money left. And he came in with his chainsaw, and he wanted to cut down the size of the public sector. And you fast forward, 12, 14 months in, and a lot of the metrics, if you look at the Argentinian economy, are actually moving in the right direction.
Yes.
My question for you is this a template that can be applied to other Latin American countries, or is it specific to Argentina?
No, it cannot be applied. It's specific to Argentina. Argentina is like the typical, alcoholic, drunk, that goes to the bottom, ends in the gutter, in the filth, and one day decides, I'm not going to drink anymore. And when that moment comes of realization that that is the wrong way, then the opportunity for someone like Milei to come out. So the problem with the other countries is they've not touched bottom. It's the alcoholism is excessive government spending, excessive government intervention, way excessive regulations. And what this creates is a bad condition in the economy. It drags people down, creates poverty. This is the trap of Latin American countries. And until they hit rock bottom, there's no opportunity for a person like Milei. I love Milei. I know him well. We invited him to Mexico 10 years ago. I'm a big libertarian. I believe in freedom. I believe in free enterprise. And I believe that it's through freedom that creates innovation, that creates competition, how you get to prosperity. It's definitely not through government intervention. And that is why the leadership of the UAE is so important as an example of what can be done right. I mean, this country is barely 50 years old. It used to be just sand. And now Hong Kong is way behind, this is way on top. This is the way,
Yeah.
And it's because you have good government policies that allow people to do things.
Do you think that there's going to be something of so-called, quote, Milei envy around other countries in Latin America, and that it will influence the direction of travel for Latin American politics, for the elections that are going to be crucial elections taking place in the next couple of years?
I mean, his presence is definitely having an influence. And even in my country, the work that is done through social media is so important to get people aboard. What we're talking here is what's needed is a revolution of the culture revolution. And we call it the cultural battle. So what is the cultural battle? And I'll tell you like this. The cultural battle that is being fought across the world, not only in my country or Latin America or in here, is between left and right, between slavery and freedom, between individual initiative and government orders, between achievement and poverty, prosperity and poverty. That is a cultural battle. And we need to face it head on because, unfortunately, the leftists have totally appropriated the narrative that they do good for the people, when in fact, what we have is tremendous poverty as evident in Cuba, in Nicaragua, in Venezuela, and approximately, Colombia. It's bad policy.
Some of what you're saying sounds a little bit like a certain gentleman called Elon Musk. He's been saying the same things in the U.S., similar things in the U.S. But what do you make of having a tech titan be so actively involved as an advisor to the US president?
Yeah. Well, I think good for him. I think if he hadn't bought X, things would be very different, because X was totally captured by the left, and in the cultural battle, we were dead, because you would be deplatformed immediately if you said things like I'm saying today. And it's thanks to Musk investment of, I don't know how many billion. I don't think it was such a good investment, personally, in a business side. But from a political side and from what it means for humanity, it's amazing to be able to have free speech.
Yeah.
And free speech means free. It doesn't mean that somebody can censor you. So that you have to be very, very clear on that. And I think at the end of the day, Musk, other than being a genius at business, which he is, obviously, he also is deeply caring about what kind of humanity we want. And I think he is pro-freedom, and that should be a big step in the right direction for anybody who believes in freedom, is supporting that.
Yeah. Do you worry that if you look at the world holistically right now, the fact that we're moving towards a more multipolar world with different blocks around the world, different prerogatives, as I spoke about at the beginning, the fact that the US seems to be pursuing an America First policy, is that a negative contribution
negative,
for trade?
Because what we need is integration.
Right.
Like, the example of the Emirates here is very good. They have tolerance for different cultures, for different points of views, but they're open and they trade with one and the other. Unfortunately, in America, there's this thing called jingoism. And it's very negative. I mean, we've been neighbors with the States for a long time, so we know a lot about American politics. And it's very difficult to deal with them, because they're so ignorant of what goes on in the world. You know? So the Americans always look inside, and all the problems seem to come from outside. They don't own any of the problems.
I'm going to take you on a slightly other tact, not specific to Latin America, but you have been very vocal on this. You're a big Bitcoin believer.
Yes.
And so let's say you're somebody watching this conversation in the room and you missed out on the Bitcoin rally. It's trading close to $100,000 here. Do you still buy it, and why? What is the use case? What is the actual proved use case for Bitcoin here?
So Bitcoin is a tool for freedom. It gets you into a different universe outside of the financial system. And I say this as a banker because I have a large bank. We have 22 million clients. I know all about banks and regulations and KYC and AML and da-da-da. However, banks have become a tool of government to control people. And in many countries, you find that the money that you're supposed to have in the bank, number one, it's not your money, it's the bank's money. And number two, you can only use it if the bank allows you to. And number three, if the government allows the bank to allow you to. So that is a totally unfair proposition, because the money that you have is product of your hard work. And you should be able to own and dispose of it as you see fit. So that is why Bitcoin is such an amazing tool. You can put this value in the internet and then take it from the UK to the UAE or to Mexico or to China, Japan, wherever. It's accepted everywhere. In 10 minutes, you can transfer billions of dollars for $2, $5, $10 fee. And that is a use case. Now, what does it mean to be able to store your value where it can't be stolen from you? It means a lot. In developed countries like Europe or the US, they haven't realized how important this is. But in countries like us, where we come from, the government can expropriate you in 1 second, so it's good to have your resources somewhere else. So that's why Bitcoin is important. Now, in terms of valuation, well, we could be here a long time discussing how 100,000 is good or bad or where it's going. But for anybody interested, you can look up Michael Saylor's presentation in YouTube and how to value Bitcoin. And you'll see that Bitcoin today, its market cap is 2 trillion. Gold is 16 trillion. Equity is 120 trillion. Real estate is 300 trillion. So if just a small fraction of those trillions move into Bitcoin, it's going to go 10 times higher.
Well, next time we'll have to continue the conversation specifically about crypto, but I did want to end on that. Ricardo Salinas, thank you so much. Really fascinating to kick off this part of the plenary with a discussion about Latin America and some of the investment opportunities you see. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.